That was pretty awesome worship this morning, by the way. You should have heard it from this side. You guys were awesome, and them kids are just fantastic. And it just does my heart so good to see them up here. We're going to take communion this morning. We're going to just come to the Lord's table. But before we do, there's a couple verses in 1 Corinthians that I was just going to press into a little bit. It says, let a person examine himself then. And so eat the bread and drink of the cup. And that's 1 Corinthians 11:28. When Paul wrote this, he was addressing some disagreements that had come up in the Corinthian church. You know, he didn't want people to share the Lord's Supper in anger, or their hearts were, mean toward each other. Just like the New Testament times, God calls us to come to communion with a heart that is repentant and desires to be right with God. That is important. A repentant heart that desires to be right with God. And here's the other part. Not just with God, with people in our lives. Doesn't mean we have to be perfect. We can't be. In fact, the communion reminds us of the forgiveness that comes with this. So I'm going to just take a moment here. We're going to, and you know this is going to make people uncomfortable, because it does. I'm just going to ask you guys to bow your heads, and in silence in this building, if you need to deal with God right now, do it. God, in the silence, we hear our own voices and our own thoughts. And it allows us an opportunity to examine ourselves, to look at our lives and where we are at with you and with our neighbors. God, expose those things in our lives that need to be worked on. Show us those things that we have to be better at. And help us, God, to come to the table this morning with repentant and humble hearts. Thank you. For I received from the Lord what I passed on to you. On that night when Jesus was betrayed, the Lord Jesus took bread. He gave thanks and he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. This do in remembrance of me." God, thank you for your broken body. Thank you that you sacrificed yourself for us so that we could stand in the presence of God. Because without it, that separation, there would be no getting through it. Thank you. He also took the cup. And he said, "This cup is the new covenant established by my blood. And do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Take the cup. This do in remembrance. As I said, for as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup. And there's no set time limits on this. I know that, for years, I know we did communion once a month, and we do that because it's convenient and because it works, and we can keep it in schedule. But God says as often as you do it, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.